Who is the most famous Stoic in history? Stoic Penglai journeyed through time, the search for the greatest Stoic. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself stepping into the vast, echoing corridors of history. The marble floors resonate with the footsteps of generations long past. Statues of dignified philosophers line the halls, their faces carved in stone, frozen in expressions of unshaken calm and quiet. Strength, ancient scrolls, weathered by time yet resilient, lie scattered in dimly lit libraries, holding the distilled wisdom of centuries. And if you listen carefully, you might still catch the faint murmur of voices, echoes from the minds that once shaped the philosophical landscapes of the world. Amidst these relics, a timeless question stands tall, like the enduring columns of a Roman forum. Who was the most famous Stoic in history? At first glance, it seems like a simple inquiry, but the nature of fame is deceptive, as fleeting and fragile as a shadow that dances on a wall when the sun shifts. Stoicism itself warns us not to chase glory, for public applause is hollow and transient. Yet, despite that caution, some names have stood the test of time, not because they sought renown, but because their wisdom, character, and way of life burned too brightly to ever be extinguished. So how do we begin to answer this question? What makes a Stoic not only recognized, but remembered for millennia? Is it their unshakable mastery over emotions, the extent of their political influence, the power of their written words? Or perhaps it is the quiet dignity with which they lived, embodying the Stoic principles not just in speech but in every fiber of their being? To seek the answer, we must journey back, far back, to the bustling marketplaces of ancient Greece. There, amidst the lively chatter and the clamor of merchants, walks a peculiar figure, barefoot, modestly dressed, and often appearing unkempt. Yet his mind was anything but disordered. This was Zeno of Citium, the man who would plant the seeds of a philosophy that would grow through the ages. The founder, Zeno of Citium. Zeno's story begins not with triumph, but with tragedy. Though in hindsight, it was the kind of tragedy that sets a new course for a life. Quite literally, Zeno was shipwrecked. He lost everything he owned when his vessel sank, leaving him stranded in Athens, a foreign city, penniless and with no clear future. But fate, or perhaps providence, had a peculiar way of redirecting his path. Wandering through the streets of Athens, Zeno stumbled into a bookshop. There, he discovered a text about Socrates, the great philosopher known for his relentless questioning and pursuit of truth. Something within Zeno stirred, and with that moment, the trajectory of his life shifted dramatically. Inspired, he sought out the Cynics, those philosophers who lived with radical simplicity, embracing discomfort as a means of training the soul. Yet, Zeno was not content to merely imitate. His mind sought something more structured, a philosophy, not just of rejection, but of resilience, order, and virtue. He gathered his students beneath the Stoa Publicae, the painted porch in the Athenian Agora, where merchants, politicians, and thinkers all crossed paths. It was here that Stoicism was born, not in the secluded chambers of the elite, but amid the common pulse of the city. Despite laying the foundation for one of the most enduring philosophies in human history, Zeno himself is not the most famous Stoic. His life, though rich in discipline and thought, lacked the dramatic episodes that often etch a name deeply into public memory. He lived with quiet rigor, teaching and shaping minds without the fanfare of conquest or scandal. Still, in his quietness lies a profound lesson. Great ideas often emerge from great adversity. Zeno lost everything, yet from the wreckage of his former life, he constructed a worldview that continues to guide people over 2,000 years later. His shipwreck was not his end, it was his beginning. Reflections. Sometimes, I reflect on Zeno's journey and ask myself, how many of us perceive the shipwrecks in our lives, the losses, the failures, the unexpected disasters, as final? How often do we mourn what we've lost, not realizing that within that destruction lies the potential for a philosophy, a worldview, or even a personal rebirth that could redefine our existence? Zeno teaches us, without grand proclamations, that sometimes the end of one journey is the quiet start of another, one built not on possessions, but on resilience, virtue, and inner strength. The emperor, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher, king leaving behind the vibrant, dusty marketplaces of Athens. Let us now traverse the annals of time and step into the marbled, opulent corridors of imperial Rome. The air here feels heavier, thick with the scent of power, politics, and the ever-present shadow of betrayal. In this world of emperors, generals, and senators, another Stoic figure emerges, though this one is not barefoot like Zeno, but cloaked in the finest regal robes, his brow adorned with a laurel crown. Yet beneath all the symbols of earthly power lived a man whose soul was deeply steeped in the teachings of Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. Imagine for a moment the most powerful man on earth, commanding mighty legions, presiding over an empire that stretched from the windswept moors of Britannia to the deserts of Egypt, a ruler whose decisions could alter the fate of millions. And yet, when night fell and the torches burned low, Marcus Aurelius did something profoundly humble. By the soft flicker of an oil lamp, he would sit alone, quill in hand, writing not decrees for his empire, but private reflections addressed solely to himself. He called this collection To Myself. Yet the world would come to know it by another name that would echo through history: Meditations. Unlike Zeno, Marcus did not stand before students in open forums, nor did he establish a philosophical school under a painted porch. His classroom was his own mind, his struggles, his relentless self-scrutiny. His students were the pages of his journal, quietly bearing witness to his inner battles. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words, and countless others like them, are not idle musings of a detached philosopher sheltered from the world. Marcus Aurelius penned these lines amidst the most turbulent conditions imaginable: fierce wars along the empire's borders, deadly plagues ravaging his people, political conspiracies festering within the Senate, and the unrelenting burden of imperial duty. His reign was marked not by peace and prosperity, but by chaos and strife. Yet, even in the heart of this storm, Marcus carved out a citadel of clarity within his mind, a sanctuary of Stoic discipline where external calamities could not intrude. Personal commentary: every time I open Meditations, I find myself pausing, often mid-page, to marvel at the man behind these words. How could someone bearing such immense responsibility still remind himself, day after day, of humility, patience, and virtue? How could he, amidst the clamor of armies and the whispers of courtiers, still return nightly to his inner reflections? It feels as though Marcus is whispering directly across the centuries to us, reminding us that no matter how high we climb, no matter the crowns we wear, the titles we hold, or the responsibilities we shoulder, none of us is exempt from the inner work of philosophy. If the emperor of the known world needed such reminders, what does that say about us? Why Marcus endures? Perhaps this is why Marcus Aurelius endures as the most famous Stoic in the eyes of many. His life so vividly encapsulates the very conflict that Stoicism seeks to resolve: the eternal tension between the chaos of the outer world and the serenity we must cultivate within. And isn't that the very same battle we each face today? Our wars are no longer fought with swords and shields, but across boardrooms, within family dynamics, or silently within the anxious corridors of our own minds. Our plagues are not only physical diseases, but also the creeping specters of insecurity and overwhelming anxiety that cloud our daily lives. Yet, like Marcus, we are offered a path back to stillness. We may not have an empire to govern, but we have our own personal kingdoms, our minds, our choices, our principles. We too can sit quietly, if only for a moment each day, to reflect, to write, or simply to breathe with intention. In doing so, we begin to reclaim our inner fortress, brick by brick. Reflections. Sometimes I wonder if even the most powerful man in history required Stoicism to remain grounded, centered, and virtuous. What lesson does that hold for us? Perhaps philosophy, true philosophy, is not a luxury reserved for quiet times of peace, but a vital necessity in the midst of the storm. Because in the end, it is not about escaping the storm, but about learning to stand firm within it, calm, clear, and unshaken. The enslaved philosopher Epictetus, and the power of inner freedom from the marble halls of imperial Rome, where Marcus Aurelius once ruled. Let us now descend, not just in social status, but into the very heart of human limitation. Picture a modest, shadowy chamber, perhaps a small, poorly lit room where wealth is absent. Power is a distant dream, and dignity must be forged from within. Here we encounter Epictetus, a man born into slavery. His existence began not with privilege or possibility, but with chains. He possessed no wealth, no family name to elevate his status, and to add further hardship. His body was partially crippled, a painful reminder of his powerlessness in the eyes of society. And yet, within the grand narrative of Stoicism, His voice resounds with a clarity and strength that continues to echo through the ages. Epictetus didn't just philosophize about freedom. He redefined it entirely. To Epictetus, true freedom was not something bestowed by emperors, nor could it be stripped away by masters. Freedom, in its purest form, is the sovereignty of the soul, the unbreakable dominion one holds over their own mind, thoughts, and responses to life's inevitable trials. He famously declared, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Pause, and let that sink in. In a world then and now, obsessed with control, with shaping the outer environment to fit our desires, here was a man who controlled almost nothing around him, yet he walked the earth freer in spirit than many who wore crowns. His teachings, fortunately, were not lost to time, thanks to his devoted student Arrian, who meticulously compiled his lessons into the Discourses and the Enchiridion. Epictetus's wisdom remains within our reach. These works are neither lofty nor esoteric. Rather, they speak directly to the common soul, to anyone who has suffered, felt trapped, or stood helpless in the face of fate. Epictetus's philosophy is blunt, unapologetic, and deeply practical. It does not invite us to escape suffering through illusions, but instead to face it with the resolute power of perspective. Personal reflection: when I first encountered the words of Epictetus, I was struck by his unflinching honesty. He does not soothe with false hopes, or paint suffering with a brighter color. Instead, he looks pain squarely in the eye and declares, "You are not my master." That sentiment awakens something in me. How many of us today are enslaved, not by iron chains, but by debts, by crushing expectations, by our own unrelenting inner critic? How often do we let circumstances dictate our peace of mind, as though we have no say in the matter? Epictetus offers a kind of key, not one that unlocks doors in the outside world, but one that frees the soul from its own self-imposed prison. The legacy of Epictetus in many ways. Epictetus may be the most influential Stoic when it comes to personal resilience and psychological strength. His teachings have quietly infiltrated the modern world, the foundations of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBTO, much to his insights about perception and response. Military leaders and special forces units often draw from his maxims to maintain composure under extreme pressure. Athletes, business leaders, and those navigating personal crises repeat his mantras like prayers of empowerment. Imagine a world where every time adversity strikes, every time life denies us what we desire or burdens us with hardship, we pause and recall his principle. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. If we could deeply internalize just this one idea, would we not move through life with a lighter heart and a steadier mind? Would we not navigate loss, failure, and frustration with a sense of invincible calm? The bridge between them manned. So, as we stand back and observe the figures we've met, Zeno, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus, we see a tapestry of Stoic thought, woven from very different lives. Zeno, the founder, teaches us how to build anew from the shipwrecks of life. Marcus, the emperor, exemplifies the art of maintaining clarity and virtue amidst the burdens of supreme power. Epictetus, the slave, reveals that dignity and freedom are matters of the mind, untouched by external chains. Three men, born into three vastly different circumstances, yet all united by a single luminous thread: mastery of the self. It compels us to reflect. Is one more famous than the others? Does history remember them equally? Or perhaps their true legacy is not in whose name we remember most, but in the collective wisdom they left behind, a wisdom that forms the enduring heart of Stoicism. For while fame flickers and fades, as all external things do, wisdom endures, passed quietly from mind to mind, generation to generation, and in that quiet transmission, Stoicism survives as alive today as it was in the marketplaces of Athens, the courts of Rome, and the humble quarters of a crippled slave. PHGN 4. Beyond fame, the living spirit of Stoicism. And so, we find ourselves standing once again before the question that guided us at the beginning of this journey. Who is the most famous Stoic in history? Is it Zeno of Citium, the resilient founder who transformed the wreckage of his life into the sturdy pillars of a new philosophy? Is it Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who balanced the crushing weight of an empire with the delicate labor of inner cultivation? Or is it Epictetus, the enslaved sage who taught that true freedom is born not from external circumstances, but from the sovereignty of the soul? As we reflect on each of these extraordinary lives, a realization begins to dawn. Perhaps the answer is not singular, nor should it be. Stoicism was never meant to be the possession of a solitary figure, a philosophy sealed behind the name of one individual. Instead, it is a living tradition, a flowing current of wisdom passed from heart to heart, mind to mind, across centuries of human struggle and aspiration. Their teachings, though shaped by distinct experiences, are woven together like threads in a grand tapestry. Each thinker, Zeno, Marcus, Epictetus, contributed unique colors and textures, yet all combined, they form a constellation in the sky of human understanding. This constellation does not remain static. It continues to guide us through the ever-changing darkness of life. And perhaps, in the quietest of truths, the most famous Stoic is not found in statues or dusty tomes, but within you, the part of you that awakens when confronted with these ancient voices. Every time you choose reason over rage, acceptance over resentment, clarity over confusion, or virtue over vice, you are not just practicing Stoicism, you are becoming Stoicism in motion, a living embodiment of its enduring principles. Personal commentary. Whenever I reflect deeply on this, I realize that Stoicism is not some relic from a distant past, meant only for scholars and historians. It is not confined to museums, marble busts, or old manuscripts. It is, instead, a practice, a discipline, and perhaps most beautifully, a quiet revolution within the self on my own life. Whether I am confronted by personal setbacks, uncertainties in the world around me, or even the mundane frustrations of daily existence, I often catch the faint, steady echo of Zeno, Marcus, and Epictetus whispering in my mind. Their counsel is never loud, never demanding, but it is always present. Like a calm companion walking silently by my side, I have come to see them not as distant figures, trapped in the pages of history, but as fellow travelers on the path of life. They remind me, and all of us, that philosophy is not a theory to be admired from afar, but a way of living that must be practiced, tested, and renewed every single day. A final reflection for you. So, let me ask you, and perhaps this is the most important question of all, who is the most famous Stoic in your life? Is it Zeno, Marcus, Epictetus, or perhaps it is the version of yourself that you are striving to become, that future self who, when adversity strikes, stands firm and unshaken. That self who meets both misfortune and fortune with equal gratitude. That self who understands that death is not to be feared but embraced as a part of the natural order. In the end, Stoicism is less about public fame or historical recognition. It is about the quiet fame of character, the kind that might never be inscribed on monuments but is known intimately by your own conscience, and by the lives you gently touch with your example. And maybe, just maybe, that is the most enduring fame of all, not the fame that shouts, but the fame that whispers within, guiding us to live better, clearer, and more virtuously. The Stoic legacy in the modern world, and the call to us allos. We stand here, on the far side of millennia, long after the footsteps of Zeno, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus have faded into the dust of history. One might wonder, what relevance can their ancient teachings possibly hold for us today? Have these philosophies become little more than relics, echoes trapped in old books, or do they still pulse with life, beating in rhythm with our modern challenges? The answer reveals itself not in abstract theory, but in the reality of our daily struggles, in the tension we feel in boardrooms where decisions ripple across economies, in hospitals where the fragile line between life and death is walked every day, in classrooms where young minds wrestle with identity and purpose, and in the quiet corners of every home where personal battles rage silently. Far from being relics, Stoicism is thriving, precisely because its truths are timeless. Today, CEOs and entrepreneurs revisit Marcus Aurelius for his wisdom on leadership under pressure. Therapists and psychologists integrate Epictetus's teachings into cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, guiding patients to challenge their perceptions and master their responses to anxiety and depression. Athletes, whether on the grand stage of the Olympics or local competitions, draw from the Stoic well to remain composed, whether in triumph or loss. Military leaders, including the late Admiral James Stockdale, have carried Epictetus's words as a shield against the horrors of captivity. Stockdale himself survived over 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, often tortured, yet mentally unbroken, thanks to the Stoic armor he had forged long before. And then there is the simple, yet profound, habit of journaling. the very practice that Marcus Aurelius turned to every night. In our modern era, millions have rediscovered this practice, using journals to navigate their own thoughts, confront their weaknesses, and chart a clearer, more purposeful path forward. Personal insight: I often reflect on why Stoicism refuses to fade, despite the changing shape of the world. I believe it's because, at its core, Stoicism speaks to a universal yearning, the desire to find peace, not by escaping hardship, but by cultivating resilience within it. We live in an age of noise, social media distractions, endless entertainment, fleeting pleasures, and the unrelenting pressure to project curated versions of ourselves. And yet, through this clamor, the Stoic voice persists, clear and unwavering. Focus only on what you can control. Let everything else pass like clouds across the sky. What would your life look like if you answered that call? How much of our daily frustration, our restless comparison, our constant striving for control would dissolve if we simply centered ourselves on this one principle? An invitation to Uso. I leave you with an invitation, not just to admire the Stoics as distant sages, marble statues standing silent in the corridors of history, but to engage with them as mentors who walk beside you. Read their words, reflect deeply, write your thoughts as Marcus did, challenge your perceptions as Epictetus urged, build from adversity as Zeno exemplified, and most importantly, practice, because philosophy is not a matter of knowing, but of doing. Let every morning be a quiet return to yourself. Let every challenge be a test of your inner fortress. Let every evening be a moment of reflection, asking not what did the world do to me, but rather, how did I respond? The final reflection in the end. The most famous Stoic may not be Zeno, Marcus, or Epictetus. It may be the version of yourself that emerges each time you choose virtue over impulse, wisdom over reaction, serenity over turmoil. Because the legacy of Stoicism is not a name remembered, but a life transformed, and that life is yours to shape.